Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 6 of College Football Throwdown. I am your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and joining me today is my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Alex, and hello, fans.
Yes, it's been a little while since we've done a podcast last. Since the last time we did one of these, I actually got a new room in LA. I was previously staying at a friend's place, but now I've got a place of my own in Sherman Oaks, California. So things have been going well on my end, keeping busy at work and stuff. And now we finally had time to do a podcast again, and we're a mere 2 weeks away from the start of the season, even less than 2 weeks, as a matter of fact. So we're really getting to the crunch time, The season is upon us, and college football fans across the country are getting excited.
That's right, and all the big decisions, all those coaches that are having to make their decisions about who's going to start, at left tackle and who's going to start at quarterback, and oh my gosh, we don't have any defensive ends and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, we'll talk about that with Nebraska when we get to that.
Yes, we will.
But first things first, we're going to talk about the national perspective on what's been going on in the past 2 or 3 weeks since we last did a podcast. And the first thing we wanted to talk about were some of the preseason polls that have been coming out recently.
Right. I mean, bottom line is most of the major polls now are all out. It was historic here recently with the AP poll being a unanimous for the first time since the AP poll was created, a unanimous preseason number one in Ohio State.
Does that mean that every person who voted for the AP voted Ohio State number one?
Yes.
Wow, yeah, that is a rare thing.
Yes, and so and there's so many people that like to bash the preseason polls and think they're a terrible idea, and they get all bent out of shape because preseason polls have in the past particularly set up teams for greater opportunity just because of where they started the season.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because you can't have preseason poll and then magically after week 1 or 2 dramatically shift where people are, and historically that had never been the case. If you were 17th and the team in front of you lost, you moved up to 16th, and it doesn't and it didn't always correlate. There were teams that frankly played poorly but just kind of kept climbing up the polls because they didn't lose, right? Even though when you observe them with your own eyes as a fan, you could tell that they weren't playing top 10 level football, but they were number 8 because number 8 lost last week and they moved into that spot. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's always been a big debate about preseason polls. I think they're a great thing because they generate so much conversation and interest, and they're kind of an exciting thing. And the fact that they actually have some relevance because they do kind of start the pecking order early on for a season is not a bad thing. I think particularly now that we have a college football playoff.
It's interesting as a compromise to that how it takes 5 or 6 weeks before the legitimate numbers start coming out, or at least that's how it was, under the BCS system, where they would combine the coaches poll and the AP poll to create, the actual national ranking, but they would wait on that until 5 or 6 weeks in, so that week 1 numbers, those week 1 preseason polls aren't affecting those important decisions.
That is true, and with the College Football Committee, it's just one data point and doesn't have near the significance it used to. But it's still fun to have them, and it's debate, it's coffee discussion at the coffee table, and the water cooler at work. So I love that part of this time of year because the excitement and anticipation is so great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't really looked at any of the preseason polls. Is Nebraska ranking in the 20s at all, or are we not even on the radar?
We are not even on the radar.
I see. Well, from a certain perspective, that can be a good thing because it kind of gives you a chip on your block. You have something to prove to people.
That's true, and we have certainly been in those polls in previous years when we probably shouldn't have been, given what we had returning, and now this year, we haven't earned that right, so to speak, to be there at the beginning, especially with all the question marks. I kind of like it.
Yeah, I know you in particular. You would prefer to be underhyped than overhyped. Certainly.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So we could move on to just season outlook, and what I wanted to mention with that, Alex, is we are on the precipice of what I think is going to be a great year of college football. Last year was historic because it was the first year with the college football playoff, and frankly, probably couldn't have played out for the sport any better than it did. I mean, the team that effectively went in as the number 4 team ends up winning the whole thing. Kind of a team coming from behind. Everybody likes that kind of a story, and Ohio State certainly filled that bill last year. But now this year you have the complete opposite, where now Ohio State, with all these talented players returning, emerges as the super favorite. But there's quite a number of teams that look to be legitimate contenders for that group of 4 at the end. And so it's really exciting as you look at the season.
Yeah,
And then,
I was
go
just
ahead.
gonna mention that I don't know about like last year's like in terms of the whole season, but certainly in terms of the postseason. I agree with you. The way that championship played out really couldn't have gone any better in terms of being like a dramatic and compelling storyline. If you want to look at it that way.
Absolutely, and that's what that group and the sport needed to kind of justify their decisions, and I think that they got what they were looking for,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and ultimately that will translate to dollars and cents.
Yeah.
But the overall season outlook, I just think even if you look at the interconference games that are going to occur during the non-conference portion of the season, there's just so many great matchups that appear to be coming in, which is another result of the 2 or 3 year window that has already played out here, where people were anticipating this 14 playoff and that strength of schedule was going to be a major factor. So teams have strengthened their schedule. They've sought out marquee names and marquee games to play in their non-conference more so than I think they have in the past.
Right, which I would definitely agree is a good thing, just as a fan of the sport, because on the one hand, as like a fan of your team, you might like the easy W of playing Joe Schmo University, but at the same time, just as a fan of college football in general, you don't care about Joe Schmo University. You want to see your powerhouses play each other.
Correct. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And there's a bunch of implications there, and that's a whole nother subject. But one topic that we talked about and we wanted to at least bring up, and again, I think this is something that deserves a more in-depth conversation down the road. But I wanted to mention it now because I kind of want to get ahead of the curve. I'm surprised, frankly, that from a national media standpoint, there has not been more discussion about the very specific and mundane details of what is referred to as the cost of attendance. And so, for those who may not know exactly what that term means, it's the fact that as a result of all the various legal issues and legal battles that have been going on in recent years with the use of people's images on NCAA football video games and the efforts at Northwestern to unionize the whole focus on paying players or finding a way to pay players has led us to this point where we're going to see among the that Power Five conference at least a some kind of a stipend based payment structure that provides cost of attendance to the student athlete. Now the untold story, the difficulty that this is going to create is that they're going to come up with some. They've all agreed to do it, but the details of how they're going to execute it and how they're going to adjust for the difference in cost of attendance for, say, a place like the University of Nebraska, since this is what we're talking about, versus, say, University of Miami down in Coral Gables, Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously the cost to live down there in Florida is a lot more than it is in Lincoln, Nebraska. Okay, but you can play games with that number, and in a 4 year period of time, the difference between those two cost of attendances could be substantial. And I guarantee you that cost of attendance, every school is going to be trying to find a way to maximize that number in terms of cost of attendance, while at the same time, supposedly, it's going to be counterbalanced by the academic and admissions department, because whatever they decide that number is has to be the published number that they use for recruiting the general student athlete or general students, not the athletes. So the school is going to want that number to be as low as possible, so that their published tuition cost is low, right?
Hmm.
Uh, but but at the same time, the schools are going to want the opposite. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yeah, I was just thinking the only way I could see that working is if you just had like one really complicated algorithm or something that like took into account like minimum wage and like average living expenses for like these cities and like all these some a bunch of statistics that you could like input in based on which city you're in or whatever, what state or whatever, and like come out with a number at the end, and that would be what you'd get. It has to be something like that, because if you make it too subjective, then like you say, it can be abused really easily.
If you leave it up to the institutions or even the conferences, then individual conferences are going to have dramatically different interpretations of how much that should be,
Hmm.
and it's going to create another escalating, avenue for the war in recruiting. And so I'm telling you that the untold story right now is that this cost of attendance decision that supposedly has already been made, we're definitely doing it, is that the formulaic aspect of this is going to be an absolute recruiting disaster. And people are going to try to find ways to manipulate it. And I'm telling you, it's going to, again, likely hurt the University of Nebraska and other low population, low cost college communities where they're not going to be able to match. And I guarantee you, when the University of Miami is dangling an extra $10,000 in 4 years in front of a player who has never had money in his life, they're going to do the math, and I guarantee you those recruiters are going to be bragging about it. Oh
Hmm.
yeah, because we live in Miami, the food cost that we get to give for a per diem is $15 more than it is in Lincoln. So of course you want to come with us, because then you can eat at McDonald's and you can pocket that extra $15 or that extra $20 every day,
Hmm.
or whatever the case may be. There are so many ways that can be used as an angle in recruiting.
Yeah, no, it's
So anyway, there.
that's always been the danger of that to me, because like I agree that like the fact that like these players don't get paid anything, particularly for the ones who you know have have stakes because they're superstars or whatever, and then the fact of just that these athletes like can't, it's really hard for them to have like jobs because they're so busy between school and doing the football work that's required for a college athlete, that sometimes they need that financial help, and their
Oh,
backgrounds and all that.
I agree, Alex. I think cost of attendance is a necessity. That stipend should already be there. My argument is, I think the way that they have decided to go about trying to establish a varying cost of attendance for every school or every region or whatever is poised to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And there's another implication of cost of attendance that I wanted to mention, and then we'll get off this subject and we'll come back to it again, maybe in another podcast, during the off season. But the other point that's key here is the day that information goes into definitive play, and it's published in any way, I guarantee you that there's going to be a dozen or more legal documents filed claiming Title IX, and immediately this is going to go beyond the football student athletes, and it's going to be forced upon every student athlete, and that's the fear that these institutions have. Is yes, they can afford to pay X number of dollars for the 85 college football players, and maybe and the basketball players, the 13 or 15 college basketball players that are on scholarship. but they don't want to have to do it for the 1,500 student athletes that they have at their institution. But Title IX, I guarantee you, is going to force them to match athlete for athlete, man versus woman. And once they do that, then where do you draw the line? Pretty soon, the wrestlers, the crew team, anybody who's receiving scholastic or athletic scholarship is going to be getting part of the pool.
And
that opens
it's opened
huge,
the floodgates.
Yeah, and that's huge money, and it's going to make even the big schools are going to bite their lip at that chunk of money.
Yeah, well,
so that's. I just wanted to get it out there so that we're kind of ahead of the curve. I think we are. There's not a lot of discussion nationally that I've heard about this subject. That's a topic we'll definitely revisit again down the road. I just wanted to kind of get us in there. And so I have got all fired up because of that, Alex. And so I think I'm ready to open my cold beer here to chill out.
Yeah. It is our tradition. Oh, there it is.
Did you hear it?
Yeah, I heard it.
Good.
One thing, real quick, before we move on to the Big Ten discussion, I wanted to touch on with that. What we're talking about the season outlook for this year. I just think it's interesting, just based on some of the discussion I've been hearing, on like college football radio and stuff. It just seems like this Ohio State team seems like a team that, if all goes according to plan, as it were, could be like a historically like powerhouse football team. Like, people seem to have very high expectations for how talented they are.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. They're certainly set up, and the expectations couldn't be higher. Obviously, a unanimous preseason poll is reflective of that. And I think I mentioned to you before, Alex, that I believe that they have a chance to duplicate what Nebraska did in 94 and 95, where that 95 team, that second consecutive national champion, was a team that many regard as one of the best, if not the best, college football of all time, because they dominated everybody and just blew through the whole season. And then, were challenged by a team that many thought was the team that was going to knock them down, and then they just crushed them. And I could see Ohio State going on a run like that because their schedule sets up pretty nicely that way. They have a couple of major tests as you go through the season, an early test, a mid-season test, and then, of course, the Michigan game at the end is always tough, and then a Big Ten championship game. So they're going to have those 3 or 4 games where they're going to get a ton of national press and focus, and they're going to have legitimate opponents,
Right. Which transitions us nicely into our Big Ten topic we want to talk about, just talking basically about Ohio State and Michigan State, who are pretty much unanimously considered to be the top 2 teams in the conference this year, the ones who are most likely to meet each other. Or, I mean, I shouldn't say that. I was about to say meet each other in the championship, but Michigan State's in the same conference, in the same division, so that's not going to happen. But, it's their matchup. That game is going to determine a lot of what happens in the East. Or is it West? No, it's East. I was right.
Yes, it is East. And I agree with you. OSU and MSU are going to be both appear to be dominant teams, and I don't think there's a huge gap or difference between them except in depth. I believe OSU is way deeper than MSU.
Mm-hmm. But if their front guys make it through, then their first teamers, then it would be a tough game.
Absolutely. I mean, if both of those teams show up at that game healthy and undefeated, each of them will have beaten significant opponents already. In the case of MSU, they will have already beaten Oregon, and they would have beaten us, for example. And Ohio State would have already beaten Virginia Tech, and I don't know their schedule well enough, but possibly a Penn State or something like that, even before they play MSU.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the other thing we wanted to talk about in terms of the Big Ten was just the importance of these early games, because I know with both Michigan and Nebraska, off the top of my head, our first game of the season, it's not a throwaway, non-conference team. They are legitimately difficult games.
Yes, in fact, for example, for Nebraska, we start the season with BYU, which is going to be a top 25 team in most people's eyes. So they're a team that's coming in ranked, and we won't be. So that would suggest that they're going to beat us, even though a lot of the Vegas people still have us as the favorite because we're at home.
Mm-hmm.
So, but not just Nebraska. If you look across the landscape, the Big Ten has a huge series of games here in the early non-conference season. You've got just in that first weekend alone, you've got Michigan going out and playing at Utah, a team that they lost to like 28-10 last year in Ann Arbor. And so a team Harbaugh's first game, you can imagine the hype's already started. And then and then and then you've got Minnesota playing TCU, which is a huge deal. And then you've got Wisconsin playing Alabama. And let's see here. What else do you have? You have Ohio State playing Virginia Tech, and then us playing BYU, and that's kind of the best of them. But then you've got Michigan State playing Oregon. You've got us going down and playing Miami at Miami. And Phil Steele picked Miami Hurricanes as the number one most improved team on his analysis, pool. So he believes that Miami is going to be the most improved team in college football this year.
Mm-hmm.
That's another big game for us. And then Michigan plays BYU in like game 3 as well. I believe that is at Michigan. And so there's just quite a number of great seasonal matchups. I know Penn State has a nice matchup, although I think they are expected to I think they have like 6 home games in a row, so Penn State should have a good early start. But bottom line is there's a ton of really great games in this early season for the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of going into that, what we were talking about earlier with how just teams in general are playing a little tougher non-conference. I kind of hope, just as a fan of college football, this trend will kind of continue with like how we've had these games that are like the first week of the season, like matching up to like top 10 quality opponents. I like having a start with a bang, as it were. I think that's a good way to get the ball rolling.
No, I agree, and I think it's an outburst or an outtake of this change to a college football playoff.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And now to transition us into the Nebraska portion of the podcast, we actually had a comment on our website, which you can find at footballthrowdown.podomatic.com. We had Steve leave a comment. He asked, he said, good job again, guys. How many losses before TA is replaced, and will it be Bush or Darlington? When he says TA, he's talking about Tommy Armstrong, of course, Nebraska's quarterback.
That's correct. And, I think I can make the quick answer. I think Tommy Armstrong is by far our best option at quarterback, and I think that he won't be replaced. If he has to be replaced, it's likely going to be because of injury rather than ineffectiveness. If he's ineffective, I think they'll probably still live with him because they're still going to perceive that he is by far the best choice they've got.
Mm-hmm. So, it's not that the other guys don't have talent; they're just too inexperienced right now.
Inexperienced, right? And or there are certain aspects that they can't bring that Tommy does. I mean, Tommy is a true dual threat, and also has some. I mean, this is his 3rd year as a starter. Mm-hmm. At this point, Tommy's been around the block a little bit.
Yeah, I believe it was. It was on when Riley was interviewed on the Big Ten Network. I watched that video, and I thought it was interesting how he was saying that, like, just kind of praising Tommy a bit when they asked him about him, and how he's like really good leader in the locker room. The guys seem to respect him. And obviously that might just be Riley praising his quarterback, but I'm led to believe that he is that kind of leader type, which I think is good because our previous quarterback, Taylor Martinez, wasn't always the best at, inspiring that kind of confidence from his teammates.
Right, winning the locker room, so to speak.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And, Alex, I do want to mention if there is an easier way that we can get people, if they just go to Podomatic, right, or Podomatic.com.
Right.
And just go there and search on college football throwdown, they'll get everything that they need, right, or football throw.
Yeah. If you search college football throwdown on Podomatic's website, you'll find us.
You'll find us, and that's the key, is just to make it as easy as we can. So I guess to answer his question, he wanted to know whether it was going to be AJ or Darlington, and clearly from the fall practice, it would suggest that it's going to be Riker Fife or AJ Bush, and sounds like Darlington is probably at least another year away from being a serious contender in the quarterback battle.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then, unfortunately, we've had a number of injuries to our precious Cornhuskers since the last time we did a podcast. One of them, debilitating injury because of how important he is to our team.
Right. And it seems like every year this happens, and so I always kind of cringe when we get to this time of year, because it's inevitable that the team's going to lose some players, and it seems that Nebraska has certainly had in these last 6 to 8 years an uncanny bad luck when it comes to their very best players. I mean, I could go back through the history of preseason or early season injuries to Jared Crick, who was just after, basically ever since Ndamukong Suh graduated, every season since then, the player that was regarded as one of our best players, if not our best player on either offense or defense, was injured and gone for significant periods of time, or simply was forced to play at significantly below 100% the rest of their season, and ended up having really mundane senior seasons because of it. Mm-hmm. And including as recently as last year, where frankly, if Amir Abdullah doesn't get hurt, in his senior season, he might very well have found himself at that Heisman Trophy ceremony as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but it's just one of those things. It's the nature of it. Every team has the injuries. I'm not trying to woe as Nebraska, but it's just one of those things that I think as fans go through this time of year, it's that you're hitting the websites every day to see, oh gosh, did we make it through another day without sustaining a major injury? And I think as coaches now, they're holding guys out with fairly light injuries or light dings in an effort to try to, frankly, figure out where they are on depth-wise with the second and third and fourth teamers, but also to keep those first stringers from getting too banged up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I was surprised to remember once you told me that in the NFL they practice a lot more in terms of hours than they do in college. They have even less contact practice, like a ridiculously small amount, really.
It really is, and that has become governed by NFL Players Association and their union contracts that put some limits on the amount of contact practices and full pad practices that they can have over the course of a season, and it's a surprisingly small number at this point. Mm-hmm. Which is probably part of why I think tackling as a general rule is deteriorating in the sport, because I can tell you, again, going back to the Tom Osborne era, they had a lot of physical practices and a lot of contact, and frankly Tom's philosophy was the more the better for the most part with regard to full pad practice and tackling to the ground and all that. He used to embrace that. He wanted his quarterbacks to get hit.
Right. So going with that, then, would you argue that we didn't have as many injuries like this during the Osborne era, just because our strength and conditioning was better, or just because we had the depth that if we lost a guy, we had somebody just as good or nearly as good to replace him, so it wasn't as big of a loss?
I'm going to say both, but if I had to pick one, I would say it's about depth. Back in the day, you had a freshman team. Freshmen were ineligible and didn't play, so they had that year to get physically mature and kind of catch up with the rest of the athletes that they were going to be playing against, and they played their own JV or freshman team schedule, and so you were dealing with more mature athletes, and there was more depth because there was more scholarships, and so you had more scholarship players, so your depth was not as thin, and so I think all those things allowed coaches to have that additional repetition, and they took advantage of it. But there were still a lot of injuries then, no question about it.
Right. And then the last thing we wanted to talk about was just kind of where Nebraska stands right now as a result of these injuries and what we've been hearing out of fall practice from the coaches in terms of where we're doing well and where we're struggling a little, and how our team is shaping up for the first game here in a couple of weeks.
Well, I think some interesting things that have come out of fall camp, Alex, is that for Nebraska anyway is one area of strength that everybody expected was the defensive line, particularly defensive tackles, and I think that is still true. I think an area of concern going into fall practice was linebacker play, and I think they actually feel quite a bit better about that now than they did, at that time. So they've seen some of the kind of emergence and growth that they were hoping for out of the linebacker group, including a lot of young guys, maybe even as many as 2 freshmen that are going to play significantly and maybe even be starters in that linebacking group, at least in certain situations. And then from a weakness standpoint, so that's on the defensive side, I guess. On the strength side, on the weakness side for the defense, I think that defensive end is a position that they felt okay about going into camp. Had a couple of guys that were good, that were already somewhat experienced, and they were anticipating some emergence of younger players, and I don't think they've seen that. So I think that those who've observed practice would suggest that the defensive end is an area of great concern for us, and we're going to have to see how that plays out. And there's some things that the coaches can do to kind of mask that and kind of overcome that, and some of those involve moving some players around, taking some defensive tackles, making them defensive ends, doing some additional blitzing with your linebackers. There's a variety of things you can do, especially if those defensive ends are just sound with their technique. If they can just be neutral, they can neutralize things and not be the great pass rushers. There's other ways you can get to the quarterback. But right. All of them involve risk, Secondary-wise, I think we're looking pretty good in the secondary. Everything seems to suggest we're going to be good there. Now, if I shift over to the offensive side, but before I do that, I should maybe give you the floor and give me your thoughts and your questions.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been following like the injury reports and the day-to-day practice updates like you have, so I'm not really as up to date on what's going on there. But I think it's good to hear that because I know you and I have talked in the past about how linebackers was going to be like a big concern for us, and I'm happy to hear that, that hopefully, cross our fingers, won't be as much of an issue as we were at first expecting. So that definitely has me with some confidence, but I'm more concerned about consistency on the offense, because I like a lot of things about Tommy Armstrong, but I really do hope that he's made some leaps and bounds over the course of this offseason in terms of being more consistent as a passer and just improving his decision making, because if he can improve both of those, he could definitely be a really good quarterback for us.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Alex. I think his physical skills are really quite impressive, both as a thrower and as a runner. But the issue is his consistency and his decision making, and the fact that he's coming into a new offense obviously kind of puts him back to ground zero on the whole confidence and repetition and comfort level. But he's also been there, done that. He's seen a lot. He's seen a lot of defenses and that sort of stuff. So you'd like to think that that the game will slow down a little bit for him. And actually, as we come out of fall camp and start getting into the throes of week 1, week 2, I think some early success for Tommy would do wonders for him in terms of his confidence and how he goes about executing things. He would just be much more calm. I'm looking for that maturity as well. I don't think it's necessarily shown in, wow, isn't he playing fabulously? But I do get a sense that it's starting to come for him. So as long as he doesn't get hurt and he maybe experiences some early success against BYU and some of these other non-conference games, the Miami game certainly, if he could get through those 2 games with victories and play well, not spectacular but well, I think that bodes very well for his performance going throughout the season. What I'm more concerned about offensively is we've been devastated by injuries to wide receivers, and it continues, throughout the whole of fall camp, including losing DeMornay Pearson-L, of course, but also just a variety of other players from that position that have missed significant time, guys that were expected to contribute. And so that'll be interesting to see how they hodgepodge that together and make it work. I have a feeling we're not going to look super precise and efficient early in the season against BYU. We're gonna see a lot of fits and starts where we have a few plays where we look like we really know what we're doing, and then there's going to be some plays where we don't. So we're going to have some big plays to score points, because I'm not sure we're a team that's going to line up and march it down for a 12 or 13 play drive to score a touchdown. It's not going to.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a tough situation dealing with the fact that you've got a new coaching staff, a new offense, as well as these injuries to overcome, and plus playing a decently difficult non-conference schedule at the beginning of the season. All of that is certainly going to be a challenge for Nebraska, but not an insurmountable one, I don't think.
I would agree, and I think if our offensive line comes along and we're able to kind of lean on really a stable of running backs. We're not going to have one guy replace Amir Abdullah. We're going to have probably 3 or 4 players that are going to all get a certain number of snaps and opportunities out of the running game. And we've got great talent there. We really do. It's just that not any one of them has separated themselves clearly from the others. Now, as we go through this non-conference schedule, we may see one of those players begin to emerge.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, it's an exciting time to be a college football fan. The long wait, 9 months, is finally creeping to a close. So we'll have to look forward to the big kickoff that's coming up here.
That's right. Well, and I'll finish with this, Alex. I rewatched the Iowa game, the Nebraska-Iowa game from late last season. And it was so hard to watch. It ended up being a victory, and it was a celebrated victory and all that. It was miserable to watch that game, and to watch at times we looked very effective and efficient, like we were in total control, and other times we just looked awful against them. And it just kind of pointed out the ongoing issue with our previous coaching staff. There just was no way to anticipate how they were going to perform from week to week, even from series to series. What I'm looking forward to is that hopefully this coaching staff will get us to a point where you can go into a game knowing, okay, our defense is going to do these things fairly well and consistently, and our offense is going to do these things fairly consistently. They're not going to score every time. They're not going to do this, but they're going to be predictably good,
Yeah.
And if we get that, I think it'll be so much more enjoyable to watch, because there will be that kind of expectation that you can grow to be confident is going to happen.
Yeah, I kind of agree that a prediction I might have for this upcoming season and with Riley in general is that he might not, because honestly, Bo's start his first year where he got us to 9 games, like we were pretty ecstatic about that at the time after coming off a horrible year with Bill Callahan. And I'm not sure if, because of the circumstances and just Riley as a coach and all that, if he'll be able to duplicate that level of success. But it certainly is within the reach of possibility. I feel like maybe instead of like this team where we have like bursts of greatness, but then like bursts of horribleness like we would have our big meltdown games, like against Wisconsin and stuff in the past. Maybe we'll see a team that's like not as great right out of the gate, but they're more consistent. As we get more time and more repetitions and they learn the system and everything, we'll see that improvement. That's what I would like to see.
And I think we will see that too. I really do. So I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait for the season to get here. We will hopefully have one more podcast before the first game. By the way, your old man and the rest of your family will be in Lincoln, present and accounted for to watch that game. You're going to just have to hang out there at a Husker bar in California and watch it. And I'm sure we'll be in touch. But hopefully we'll be able to do another podcast here before the game next week, and we'll be able to run run a prediction at that time and do some other fun things. This one has run a little longer than we wanted, but
we're covering a lot.
We covered a lot of ground, and now that we're getting into the season, I think we're going to probably have to hone down the national discussion and really focus a little bit more on Big Ten and Nebraska specifically, because now we're going to have games to talk about.
Right. All right. Very good. Well, if you guys out there enjoyed this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can check us out on iTunes. We're College Football Throwdown, or on Podomatic, as we said, footballthrowdown.podomatic.com. Leave us a review or a comment, subscribe, all those sorts of things. We like hearing constructive criticism from our listeners. So I want to thank all you college football fans out there for listening to episode 6 of College Football Throwdown. And we will hopefully see you guys in a week's time. Sayonara.
Sayonara. Thanks, buddy. Have a great week.
Mm-hmm.